All right, we are on the floor of the Republican National Convention right now. Gaze out at the amazing sights. I've never had more fun in my life. I guess what we're going to do is just kind of poke around and see if there's anybody of note to speak to. Let's see who I can spot. Oh, Congresswoman Spartz. How are you?
Good.
What's your reaction to with Rumble? What's your reaction to J.D. Vance getting the nomination?
Oh, that's good. I think, we have a lot of great candidates. We have a very long bench. But it's all about President Trump and Make America Great. And
what do you expect for a second term for President Trump in terms of Ukraine and Israel as compared to the Biden administration?
I think, as President Trump said, we need to restore peace. We need to restore our economy, that we have ability for people to get wealth back and have a growth in the economy, because right now inflation and this spend is going to destroy a lot of people. And I think this is something about the future of the country, and strengthen the country, strengthen the border, strengthen the people, and really bring peace around the world. We have a disaster right now. It's awful what's happening.
President Trump has said that he has a good relationship with Zelensky. And some people question that because they think he's Putin's puppet or this kind of thing, which is silly. So what is his relationship with Zelensky and Ukraine?
Listen, it's not about...
Because Representative Spartz, you are Ukrainian, correct?
Originally, I grew up there, but I'll tell you, it's about peace through strength. And President Trump had a lot of peace around the world, and aggressors didn't move. And his policy is to bring peace and actually put pressure on countries like Russia and China. He never gets so much credit, but what he created in the Middle East with Abraham Accords, he did to Russia to move further. He was the one who actually put sanctions on Nord Stream 2. Force more production of energy. He was put back on China not to buy...
Put many sanctions on Russia?
That's right. And he is the one who actually forced Europeans and NATO to step up, to create more deterrence, to spend money to deter Russia. He doesn't get a credit for that, but his foreign policy was pretty powerful.
Will Trump continue supporting funding for Ukraine? I've spoken to other members of Congress and the Senate who said that he supported the National Security Supplemental in April to send many billions to Israel and Ukraine. Will he continue supporting that?
Well, listen, it's not about, we cannot be stupid how we spend money. We need to have strategy and oversight. Soviet Union was defeated not by weapons, but by smart strategy, but have smart energy policies. And that's what it takes, and financial policies. And that's what he can bring to the table, not to have never-ending wars where it costs a lot of money and a lot of lives. And that's what you have to be much smarter, and he's a very smart man.
What about the Biden administration policy where they allow Ukraine to use U.S. weapons to hit certain targets within Russia, but it's never clear what the parameters are?
It's all of politics, and ultimately, we have a serious war, and we shouldn't be tweeting Biden, what they're doing and threatening Putin over Twitter or X, and in reality slow walk the aid, okay? We need to have a serious conversation that Putin understands he shouldn't have advancing, he cannot do what he's going to do, but force Europeans to step up too.
Do you think Trump would remove some of the constraints that Biden has tried to impose on Ukraine?
I think Trump will do whatever it takes to bring peace back, and that's what we need. And he will stand with allies like Israel, he will put pressure on a lot of countries like Europeans that actually been not serious about this situation, and now it's become a problem for all of us, and also a serious deal with China that playing games with Iran and Russia to destabilize the whole world and come here. So I think he's very serious, and he's brilliant on his foreign policy because he's unpredictable. That deters a lot of aggression.
All right, thank you, Congresswoman. Okay, I see Congressman Mike Lawler of New York, so let's go to him. So I wanted to ask you a couple questions about a forthcoming Trump administration and Israel policy. You spent a lot of time on that. Also, issues around anti-Semitism. Do you expect for Trump to be more aggressive in combating anti-Semitism, using the mechanisms available in the federal government to pursue some of the initiatives that you've tried to advocate in Congress? What's your general synopsis of that?
Yeah, look, the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act that we passed through the House, 320 to 91, codified President Trump's executive order.
From December 2019, right?
Absolutely, which required the Department of Education to adopt the IRA working definition of anti-Semitism and all of its contemporary examples for Title VI violations of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So the president led on this back in 2019. And obviously we've seen in the 5 years since anti-Semitism on the rise, not just here in America, but around the globe. the terrorist attack against the state of Israel on October 7th. And so I absolutely expect that in a second Trump term that he would continue to lead not only in his strong support of Israel. Remember, he's the president that moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem.
He brags about that to this day, very often.
It's not so much about bragging. He
reminds us.
He did what other presidents said they would do and did not. And I think that speaks volumes, obviously, to his support for Israel, but also, obviously, his support of the Jewish people.
Now, in terms of your legislation that would have required the adoption of the IHRA definition within the civil rights enforcement framework, do you ever want? There's been some controversy among other conservatives on that. There was famously a claim that it could have criminalized citing the Bible. I'm not endorsing that, but there was some controversy. Do you ever question the validity of some of the statistics that are used to tabulate anti-Semitic incidents? Like sometimes it's a little bit ambiguous, or the criteria, especially for the ADL, comes under scrutiny. Is it empirically unassailable that there's been this massive surge? Is there any open room for debate or questioning as to whether those statistics are sound?
Well, first of all, on the issue of the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, it does not ban the Bible. It does not criminalize Christianity. I'm a practicing Catholic, okay? I would not put forth legislation that would do that. It obviously has First Amendment protections, both in terms of speech and the right to practice one's religion. But with respect to stats of anti-Semitism, I don't think anybody really would question that there has been a rise in anti-Semitism. I
guess the issue is often
when you see what we saw on these college campuses, obviously there's been a rise in anti-Semitism. What statistics somebody cites or how that is compiled, obviously anytime you're looking at stats, you can always look at the numbers and question something. But I think part of the reason that we put forth the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act is because these universities and colleges were failing to act, and in part because the definition of anti-Semitism, frankly, at times is not well understood. And it's
fluid, and it's often contested.
Well, of course it is, because there are people who hate Jews, and they want to say, no, that's not anti-Semitic, when in fact it is.
Part of why I asked is because if you look at how the ADL, for instance, tabulates that data, they will take any pro-Palestinian rally, essentially, or a huge array of pro-Palestinian chants or whatever that may not be intrinsically anti-Semitic, but they consider it as such, and therefore they put it in the database. Is that at all warranted to have skepticism about how that is done?
It's clear, and Congress recognized this, when you engage in a chant from the river to the sea, calling for the eradication of the state of Israel, that is anti-Semitism.
Even if you're a Jewish activist chanting that?
It doesn't matter what someone's background or ethnicity or religion is. If you are engaged in that kind of conduct, then yes. And so
they're self-hating Jews.
Look, you can label it whatever you want. The bottom line is when you have these incidents, which we have seen throughout the course of the last many months, you have seen a rapid rise in anti-Semitism. And what we are saying as Congress is that these universities, these colleges, have a responsibility to keep these students safe. If it was any other group, we know they would crack down on it because they have when it has popped up. But for some reason, under the guise of the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians, they think it's okay, and it's not. It's wrong.
One final question. Your wife is from Moldova, is that right?
Yeah.
And so you've taken a special interest in Eastern Europe or Ukraine-Russia conflict. I've heard you cite that your wife is from Moldova, just throwing it out there. The Biden administration doesn't really specify the parameters of this new policy that Biden announced in May, whereby Ukraine can use U.S. weaponry to strike targets inside territorial Russia, but the Biden administration is not telling us what territory exactly. It's ambiguous. It seems to be just made up on the fly. Do you see a problem with that, and might Trump resolve that to your liking?
Well, look, Russia obviously, under the reign of Vladimir Putin, has committed war crimes here in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin is a vile thug and dictator. And Ukraine, much like other allies of ours, including Israel, has a right to defend itself. And I think from my vantage point, not only should we be helping Ukraine in terms of arming them, we should be allowing them to prosecute the war and defend themselves accordingly.
Would that include, say, striking Moscow if they felt that was necessary for their self-defense?
Look, at the end of the day, when Russia has invaded Ukraine and is marching towards Kiev, is your position that Ukraine should just roll over? I mean, at the end of the day, they have to be able to not only defend themselves, but push back. And that obviously requires the ability to strike the Russian military within Ukraine and potentially, obviously, looking at strikes in Russia. And that is just a reality of war. And if anybody thinks that the United States somehow would not defend its country, its borders, its people, they're kidding themselves.
And how do you anticipate Trump and maybe J.D. Vance navigating that issue?
Look, Russia, China, and Iran are not our friends. Donald Trump knew that and understood that as president of the United States. And I think it's clear when you look at what has been allowed to happen under Joe Biden, that we need to combat this malign effort. Okay. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Congressman. All right, there's Congressman Mike Lawler of New York, spelling out some thoughts on what he anticipates for policy regarding anti-Semitism and Russia-Ukraine. There's Scott Walker, former governor of Wisconsin, former presidential candidate. Hey, Governor Walker. I'm Michael Tracey. We're with Rumble. Yeah, good to see you. So, I don't know about you, but after the terrible incident on Saturday, which I don't even want to think about, but I was struggling how to kind of comport myself. I didn't want to just delve right back into standard politics. I felt like there ought to be time to take a pause. You know, just out of respect for the gravity of the episode. How have you been thinking through that dynamic? Because, you know, whether you like it or not, the convention was right upon us. So what's your thought process been like?
Well, literally, thank God, by the hand of God, he was spared just by turning his head from a would-be assassin's bullet. I thought back as a kid. I was just literally a kid when Ronald Reagan was shot more than 4 decades ago. I remember how shocked I and the rest of America was. Now, he actually had to go in for surgery and the whole bit. Here, I mean, I think that pause and then seeing him standing up and then hearing thereafter that he was survived, such a relief. At the same time, we were horrified, upset. But, you know, that's Donald Trump. He's a fighter. The idea that anyone would have assumed that under that circumstance, being shoved out into an armored vehicle would be the normal course. But here's a guy who wants to let America, not just that crowd know, America know, he's not taking it. He's not backing down. I just thought that was indicative of the fighter that has been and will be President of the United States.
So you were governor of Wisconsin from 2011 to 2019, is that right? Yep. See, I know things, people. I'm kind of a loser. I didn't even have to Wikipedia that. And you ran for president in 2016. I believe you dropped out in September 2015. Is that right?
Yep.
You were on at least one.
I got out before I got a nickname.
Yes. Right. You didn't get. I don't want to speculate whatever nickname it might have been. But you were on a few debate stages with Trump. So an interesting dynamic now in Wisconsin is that Tammy Baldwin, running for Senate, consistently in the polls, is a couple of points. You know, sometimes quite a few points ahead of Biden.
Yeah.
The Democrats now seem paralyzed into inaction. There may have been some momentum to attempt at least to maybe force Biden to reconsider, but now everything kind of just got frozen after the incident this weekend. What do you make of that dynamic when you compare the senatorial dynamic to the presidential dynamic in Wisconsin?
Well, I think in the presidential, you've got a clear case where both candidates are known. Everybody knows Donald Trump. Everybody knows Joe Biden. So the no amount of money advantage which the Democrats have will change things. And so I think that's really the critical difference. People know what they get with Joe Biden, and it's a mess. It's not just because he's mentally questionable in terms of stability, particularly after the debate. It's not just because of age. It's because his ideas have failed us. Americans see it: high prices, gas, food, housing, you name it. They see that he's failed on the border. He's failed with public safety. They know that Donald Trump's going to fight back on those things. In the Senate race, I think it's the financial advantage. She's got ads on all the time. He has some, but not nearly enough. And in the end, that's part of it, combined with the fact that even though she's really, really liberal, that is Tammy Baldwin, she's adopted a strategy many Democrats do, which is keep your mouth shut at home, vote crazy in Washington. And so her opponent, Eric Upton, is going to have to expose that.
Now, are you the chair of this convention, or do you have some role at the convention? What is your title?
So Tommy Thompson, the former governor, and I are the co-chairs or honorary chairs of the
Former senator.
Of the host committee.
Yeah. Okay. Tommy Thompson was a senator, right? Governor, I'm sorry.
4 terms. So between us, we have 7 statewide wins for governors. So they know a thing or two about winning.
And he ran for president as well, right?
He did.
In 2008?
You're on it, man.
So, I mean, what do you make of the prospects for a second Trump term for foreign policy? Ukraine and Israel in particular, the 2 hot-button issues. J.D. Vance, having been named vice president, is going to make the media scream that he's Putin's puppet or this kind of standard nonsense. What do you make, what would you anticipate for a second-term Trump policy vis-a-vis Ukraine, vis-a-vis Israel that would be different from the Biden administration?
Well, if Donald Trump was in his second term right now, Putin wouldn't be there.
But he's not, so let's look forward.
But I think that ties to it because
that's such second guessing, or that's counterfactual.
No. But Putin didn't make a step in during his 4 years. He went in to the Crimean Peninsula under Obama. He went even further in under Joe Biden's, particularly after his weakness in Afghanistan. I think peace through strength is something we talked about with Reagan, but it's equally as true with Donald Trump. Foreign leaders didn't mess around with Donald Trump. They won't going forward.
Well, Trump did start arming Ukraine, and that antagonized Putin. He said so in his own speech in February 2022.
But I think in the end, he knows. The bigger worry to me is not Putin. It's the CCP and China. China's a much more formidable foe.
China and Russia are closer than they've ever been, arguably.
Well, that's what I mean, but that's the bigger thing we should be focused on. You look at our southern border, you look at Peter Schweizer's book, Blood Money, he documents how there's 2,000 some Chinese nationalists acting as chemists that are just across our southern border, that they're providing pill presses at cost, doing all these things to undermine America from within. China's a much more fierce opponent and adversary to the United States right now. I think Donald Trump's been very clear in pushing back against China. I think when it comes to Israel...
What does pushing back mean? Militarily?
Well, again, I think you don't need to. Ronald Reagan, when I was a kid, the safest time in American history was when the 8 years Ronald Reagan was president, and he built up the military. Peace through strength wasn't just some slogan. People were afraid to mess with Donald Trump in the United States because of his actions.
Well, there are some conservatives nowadays who at least claim to be skeptical of what they call the military-industrial complex. Peace through strength, that cliche, that requires spending massive money on the military budget, payoffs to defense contractors, that sort of thing. Is that what we're expecting? Ballooning the military budget even further?
No, I think you should be smart, and the fact is we haven't been for quite some time. We can be highly effective when it comes to military deterrence. In the years after Reagan, we have what we called the peace dividend, that by bringing the Soviet Union to their knees, we not only were able to draw down what we had to spend there.
Those are in the Clinton administration. Well, he claimed that he reaped the peace dividend and could lower military spending.
Clinton got it because of Reagan. If the Soviet Union was still a threat, we were still dealing with nuclear proliferation, it wouldn't have happened. Because of Reagan's strength, we had that. It's precisely why when Democrats will point to that era and having a balanced budget, it was only because of that and because House Republicans held them to that. But I think going forward, again, it's one of those where we should take care of America first, but at the same time, you can still be a deterrent to people taking aggressive actions around the world just by the virtue of strength.
All right, thanks, Governor Walker. Yeah.